Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Flipman Dan here with Cairo of Life of Cairo. We're going to talk a lot about side hustles, Airbnb, and a bunch of other stuff. Cairo, it's great to have you on, man.
Thank you so much, Flipman Dan. I'm excited.
So, Cairo, let's just start out with your background of how you kind of embodied the entrepreneur spirit from just hustling and grinding and getting some stuff done from a couple of years ago.
Well, I moved from South Africa to London thinking I was going to be a famous musician. And then I realized that rent is very expensive in this city. So, most of the other musician people I know that moved here, they end up working, crazy, crazy hours in bar jobs and stuff like that, or in restaurants. And then you don't have any time to play music. So that felt kind of counterproductive. I was like, I didn't move all the way here to just be like a waiter in a restaurant. So I tried to figure out side hustles that I could do while pursuing the music. And yeah, did a whole bunch. I was a tour guide. I was a pub crawl company owner. I did a whole bunch of these different things, like copywriting for different companies and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, eventually stumbled into Airbnb, helping my mom with her Airbnb in South Africa. And then, yeah, had to spend quite a bit of time figuring out how to do it in London for myself and convince landlords and, get permission from the local council, the local neighborhood and municipality. And yeah, I did. And it's been amazing because pretty much was able to get a really good income without having to put in lots of hours. So that gave me lots of time to do my own music and to pursue other things like YouTube channels and other side hustles as well.
So, Cairo, I know the life of a musician can be difficult at times. Before you jumped into the Airbnb side hustle, describe your living situation and how you kind of worked your way up into your current spot.
Well, actually, the pub crawl side hustle was going really well, but I made a few bad decisions in terms of who I would work with. Um, yeah, and then that ended up in kind of embezzlement. A business partner stole lots of money, and then that company basically went down the tube. So that was pretty depressing because I had to move out of my apartment and just like couch surf for months to be able to save up because basically all my money was tied in that company and those bank accounts got frozen and everything. It was awful. So yeah, I went from having a pretty decent apartment to having to like couch surf and like stay at random people's houses, acquaintances, that kind of thing. But I quickly realized, okay, well, let me figure out the Airbnb thing because then I can offset my whole living expense, by rent hacking or house hacking. Because like, man, housing is the most expensive part of pretty much anyone's budget, whether it's a mortgage or whether it's rents, and especially rents in London. Especially before 2020 was just insane. People spending 60, 70, 80% of their monthly income on rent. So I was like, I got to get rid of that. And if I can hopefully make a profit on top of whatever Airbnb stuff I do, that would be ideal. So yeah, so that's what I did. And it was a bit risky in the beginning because I had to get a loan to be able to afford, to convince a landlord. I was like, okay, well, I'll pay you more deposit and I'll pay you a month in advance and I'll pay you the last months in advance as well, that kind of thing. So that ended up being like, $10,000 that I had to come up with. So I had to get like a hard money loan basically to cover that. So there was quite a lot of risk involved, but luckily it turned out for the best.
So I know rent in big American cities like New York City can be upwards of $2,000.
Yeah.
That something that is in London as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. So the first Airbnb flat I got, I have four now, and two of them my fiance works on with me as well. So the first flat that is still they're all in central London, and this one is £2,275. So that is probably upwards of $2,500, and it's for a two-bedroom apartment. So it's quite steep. And then you have to pay council taxes, utilities, all that stuff on top of that as well. So, and this in this apartment, this is the one that I kind of rent hacked. So we turned the living room into the biggest bedroom. For one person, it's fine. For two people, it's a little cramped. But it's you have to like keep that perspective that, oh, okay, it's very cramped now, but we're not paying rent, because basically the two other rooms completely offset the rent and make a healthy profit on top of it as well. So that's what we started with. And then from there, I was like, oh, this is really working. Let me try and find some other landlords to do this with, to scale this a little bit. It's quite hard to scale doing one landlord at a time, because to convince a landlord to do this is not the easiest of jobs. So there's lots of cold emailing, lots of attempted convincing, meeting them in person, try wheeling and dealing, negotiating, that kind of thing. And but luckily we found three other places that were open to it. So that was going really, really well, until travel completely halted in 2020 this year.
Right. I know, the coronavirus economy is probably a lot worse where you're at, because there was literal shutdowns of Airbnb and renting and all that stuff. But before you got into the rent hacking scenario that you kind of developed for yourself, what kind of effort did it require to get these landlords to agree to these terms, and how much outreach was required for something, where it isn't necessarily desirable for these landlords to allow you to do something like this?
Yeah, so I mean, my big advice for anyone that would be interested in doing this is just trying to put yourself in the landlord's position. So in a big city like New York, like LA, like London, the landlords do have a lot of churn. They have a lot of people coming and going, and every time someone leaves, the landlord has to go through the process of either having an agent try and fill the room or fill the apartment, or trying to do it themselves. And there's like quite a lot of effort involved on the landlord's behalf. So the landlord, they hate vacancy. So if there's a month open or 2 months open, that ends up costing the landlord $2,000, $3,000, $6,000 is a lot of money, right? So I tried to use that as much leverage as I could by saying, look, I'm going to be having professional cleaners in. I'm going to be doing the cleaning myself. I'm vetting the guests. They're coming for 2 or 3 days. They're coming to a big tourist destination. They're probably not even going to be cooking that much. They're probably just going to be sleeping in the apartment. So in terms of wear and tear, you'll have them actually you'll have them using the apartment less than a regular tenant would. So that, I think that kind of swayed the first landlord. And also I just had to be annoying and nag him, really. His property I thought was overvalued. I thought he was asking too much rent for it. And then he said no to me the first like 4 times. And then eventually I was like, okay, look, I'm going to keep calling you every week. And, if someone takes it at this very high rent that you're asking, fair enough, good luck. But if they don't, then let me take it. Let's try it out. Let's do like a 6-month trial. And, if it's not worth it for you, if it's not working for you, just give me a month's notice. And then, we'll shake hands and leave as friends. And after I think 5 weeks from my first contact with that landlord, he eventually said yes. So it took over a month to get that agreement. But it's been worth it for him, because I've been here 4 years now. So he hasn't had any churn. He hasn't had any vacancy. He hasn't lost any money in that regard. So and he's an overseas landlord, I think, as well. So a lot of landlords in London, and I would imagine in big cities, they want to be as hands off as possible. So he's getting a high rent. He's not paying any commission to an estate agent, a realtor, and he's got a tenant in me that has been here for 4 years. And hopefully when I leave this place, I'll still be able to use it for Airbnb. So he might have me for years to come, hopefully.
Wow, that's pretty amazing how you went about leveraging the long time that the unit was up for rent to your advantage. And for someone that would try to do something similar to what you did, it would probably be a good idea to look out for those units that maybe are overpriced, and that those potential tenants could get in by doing the Airbnb route?
Yeah, I think at the moment is a really interesting time, because if someone was interested in doing this, you know, the situation that we're in now with 2020 being such a mess is that there are a lot of landlords who are kind of uncertain what the future is going to hold. They don't know. I mean, in the US, there's the moratorium on evictions that's been extended for another month now. Some landlords are worried about their mortgage, and there's the mortgage forbearance. There's all these like different factors coming into account now. So it might be a pretty good time, especially in the US, to negotiate with landlords, right? Because you could say, okay, well, I'll take this. Maybe I won't pay the current, anyway, the current market levels have likely dropped. I mean, I can't be certain in the US, but in London, for example, I mean, the average rent has dropped dramatically because people realize, hey, I can work from home. I can work remotely. I don't have to necessarily be in a big city. So you can use that as leverage when negotiating with a landlord and be like, all right, well, I'm going to be getting tourists in, I'm going to be getting in these short-term renters. Regardless of what happens, I'm going to be paying the rents. You don't need to worry about, me losing my job or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you have, the chutzpah to go out and try and negotiate with some landlords, now is actually possibly a really good time.
So how have you used this time currently with the state of London and Airbnb to maybe pivot to some other ways to make money? I don't know if
Yeah.
it was completely put on halt for you, but where do you see
Yeah.
your future in the business?
Well, my business was music and was Airbnb, and both of those are not Corona friendly, that's for sure. So, a lot of the Airbnb customers we would get would either be tourists or they would be corporate travelers. Now, again, corporate travel pretty much completely halted as well. So it kind of made me realize, and now you see it on financial YouTube channels all the time, the importance of diversifying and mitigating your risk. And they often talk about that in terms of like your stock portfolio, or get into real estate, get into bonds, get into crypto, get into the stock market, mix it all up. So if one of those has a bump in the road, you're not going to be left holding the bag. So yeah, 2020 definitely made me realize that, because we went from having a very, very healthy side hustle income to basically having to, really put foot to make sure that we covered our basic expenses, because, just our expenses every month with the rent and the utilities and everything, that came to £10,000 a month. So when coronavirus first happened, we were like, we still have to pay. I think £10,000 is like maybe $14,000, and that's our fixed costs. So we had to negotiate really hard with the landlords to try and, work together on that. And thankfully the landlords understood, and they're like, okay, well, we'd rather get less money from you than you leave, and then we have no one and we have to try and find someone in these uncertain times. So the first part of 2020 was trying to arrange those discounts and those negotiations and find medium to longer term tenants, which we pretty much managed to do for most of the rooms and stuff. And then I was like, all right, cool. Well, now what do I do? So then I was like, oh, well, let's get back into YouTube. So that's when I started a YouTube channel. Maybe because I'm a glutton for punishment, because just like music, YouTube is going to take ages before you can, build up that groundswell of subscribers and of viewers, and, make it viable to get monetized, or either through, Google AdSense, or through affiliates, or through brand deals, or selling your own products or courses. So yeah, started YouTube on two channels, my music channel and mainly my kind of $1 million hustle channel. And that's just basically documenting my journey, like trying to figure out how to get to $1 million net worth. I was on a good trajectory with the bar crawl, and then that went basically to zero, and I'm sleeping on couches and like couch surfing. So yeah, trying to set myself one of those goals to get to $1 million within the next 3 years. So we'll see what happens. But regardless of whether I make mistakes or what I learn, I'm going to put that all in video format on the YouTube channel.
Well, that's great for the viewers, and it's great to have a lofty goal like that. And you put it out into the universe, and only good things can happen. And hey, if you don't reach there, I mean, lessons will be learned. That's for sure. So I wanted to touch base about how it is living with Airbnb tenants, because I know you're in close quarters with them, and some people might be hesitant to go the Airbnb route because they're unsure of what's it like to live with these people that I don't know who they are. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, when it was just me, when I was just by myself, before I found my girlfriend, who's my fiance now, I think it was a lot easier. One, because there was also one less person in the apartment. So, in the apartment that we live in, there's 2 other rooms. Guests often travel in couples. So there would be 6 people sharing one bathroom. So regardless of whether they're guests or not, whether they're regular housemates, can be a little tricky, with so many people needing to use one shower, one toilet. So that logistical element is a bit of a pain. And then also it's a big learning curve that people are coming from all over the world, and they have different customs, and they have different ways of doing things. For example, in like a lot of Asia, the bathroom is a wet room. So everything kind of gets wet, and that's how it's designed. But that is not how the bathrooms in the UK are designed. So I'd be like, why is there water everywhere? And it took me a while to realize, because I haven't been traveling in Asia, that's just a cultural difference. They do things differently there. So yeah, it was pretty interesting to kind of gel with the different cultures. And then also sometimes people do weird stuff. Like someone used my toothbrush. Like why why would you use my toothbrush? So
Gross.
that was a weird thing. Like, you don't want to go to your toothbrush and it's wet and it's got like, yeah, I'm like, no. But the worst Airbnb situations, thankfully, weren't when people were living with us. That was when we were renting out like a whole apartment. That we had a few weird situations there, like people booking it and throwing a party. Like, I made a video about this, actually, about how the one flat got catfished. Yeah, it's a pretty funny video, but luckily, I managed to get most of that through the Airbnb resolution center back, because they caused a lot of damage. But overall, it wasn't a terrible experience. And if anyone watching this is interested in doing Airbnb, the Airbnb resolution center, it's not insurance, but they are pretty helpful. And as long as you have documented everything, and there's like a clear way to show what was damaged, and you can find quotes for replacements or for any kind of repair work that would need to be done, they're pretty reasonable in helping you out. And then you can also get third-party insurance, which is a very good idea to kind of mitigate any of those kind of things. And then when you are directly living with guests, just by having like a clear set of guidelines and managing expectations, I think that's really important. That's kind of the main thing I try and do, because this flat, for example, is a good flat, but if people are leaving 5-star reviews, which every Airbnb host strives for, because if you don't get the 5-star reviews, Airbnb basically thinks you failed. So it's like you get 5 stars, which is pass, and 4 stars, which is fail. So that's kind of a very high pressure system to be in, because the guest doesn't realize that. So the guest might have had a great time and they give you a 4-star because they just don't love London that much. And you're like, that means I failed. So trying to manage their expectations, that they're not coming to a 5-star, 4 seasons hotel. They're coming to a 5-star shared accommodation Airbnb. And I think that, especially when starting out with Airbnb, being able to manage those expectations will save you loads of heartbreak, loads of heartache, and loads of, angry messages that you have to diffuse.
Wow. So manage expectations. You're
Yeah.
going to be sharing a bathroom potentially with 6 people. Surprise. So, what other lessons have you learned over the years of this Airbnb experience?
Well, I learned how to like make beds like an absolute champion. Um, but the first while when I just had the one apartment, I was making all the beds, doing all the cleaning, and I ain't got time for that. So, being able to delegate and hire other people to do the jobs that you don't no longer have time for. When I wasn't earning any money, it made more sense for me to do the cleaning than to pay someone else the cleaning fee. It just made more sense. But same with YouTube, right? Like at some point, as YouTubers get bigger and bigger, they might hire out a manager or someone to source brand deals or an editor or someone to help with I don't know, research or scripting. They might do that because at some point their time becomes too valuable and they just don't have enough of it. So yeah, hiring the cleaners was really, really helpful. Um, and also trying and figuring out how to do the pricing, how to talk to guests, lots of customer service, and not only how to talk to the guests if there was an issue, but also how to talk to the Airbnb team, the resolution team, because this is often a team that is in, I don't know, in the Philippines or in a different country. They're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of like open complaints every day. And once or twice, like I would be very angry or very annoyed or very frustrated. And I had to be very careful not to take that out on the poor, Airbnb support worker who's just doing their job. They're not invested in anything, you know, they don't know exactly what happened. So those were some big lessons, I'd say, how to deal with the guests, how to deal with the customer service aspect of everything, how to delegate properly. And also in terms of cleaners, like, we don't have enough scale to hire someone full time because you need quite a lot of Airbnb apartments. And even in that, there's a lot of risk because if you hire one full time staff member and they get sick, what do you do? Especially like we were traveling a lot, or I travel for music. I'm not in the country. I can't go do the cleaning, and you don't want to have to find last minute, someone on Craigslist or something to do the cleaning for you. That's like too risky. So you kind of need to have part-time workers and enough of those part-time workers to be able to fill in for someone. You need to make sure each of those cleaners is getting enough business from you. Otherwise, they're just not going to stick around for a clean every third week, something like that. So yeah, juggling that kind of stuff and figuring out what processes and systems to put in place to make sure that it worked as efficiently as possible and that there weren't any mistakes. Yeah, that was crucial. I mean, just on that note, like the one time the cleaner we used this app to connect the cleaner to the job, and it didn't come through, or she hadn't updated the app, or I don't know what the reasoning was, but she was an hour late. And that meant the guest arrived before the cleaner did. And obviously the flat's dirty. And this is a £3,000 booking. So let's say $3,500 booking, right? Over New Year's for like quite a long period of time, the guests just like lost their stuff, was completely unreasonable, wouldn't listen to anything, even though I offered like to give them a part refund and to like buy them coffees and all that kind of stuff while they waited for the cleaner. They wouldn't have any of it. So just that one tiny mistake, I mean, Airbnb gave them their money back straight away. I lost $3,500 because of a tiny little glitch, either the cleaner or the app or something like that. So trying to minimize those errors is very key.
Wow, yeah, just being prepared and if it can go wrong, it will, it seems, in this industry yeah. As well as many others. So, I mean, all of these are amazing tips for someone looking to get into the Airbnb business. And it's really great of you to be reaching for that, $1 million mark. What do you see the future looking like in the next couple of years for you to get to that mark?
Well, kind of towards the end of 2019, I was thinking, okay, well, it's pretty difficult to scale just one landlord at a time. So I was looking at the bigger companies that were doing kind of 5-year leases. They would lease a 10-unit block up to a 200-unit block of apartments and then have the entire block serviced accommodation. So whether that's catering to corporates or whether it's catering to the tourist market. So I was trying to like start working on that. I was trying to get funding. I was trying to, write business plans and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's not the easiest time to get investor funding for travel related stuff at the moment. So that's on hold. But that would potentially be a good way to get towards that $1 million mark, especially if you start scaling, with far more apartments. At one point, at the best time, I'm happy to share numbers because that's what, when I watch YouTube about finance, I'm like, I love it when they share the grit, So I made more in detail videos about the finances of everything on my channel. But the best months we had were like $14,000 profit months. That's after paying everyone, obviously before tax and stuff. And the amount of work that we were doing in those months was probably like maximum 2 hours a week. So, $14,000 for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a month, I'll take that. It's pretty great. So in terms of scaling that that's from 4 apartments. So if you scale that to 40 apartments or 100 apartments, could be incredible. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens with the whole world and travel and everything before that can happen. And so other things that I do, I started working at a music marketing company, freelancing there, getting some of my own marketing clients because I've been doing marketing for a while now, helping e-commerce brands with their Facebook ads and that kind of stuff, writing newsletters or writing email copy and that kind of stuff. And then the YouTube channel, I'm sure you can attest, Dan, that it's with your video production background that a newbie starting out with video is like, they think, oh, look, it's so easy to make these YouTube videos. But yeah, hundreds of hours later, you're like, okay, I can finally press post.
Yeah, it's definitely not as easy as pressing record and then out pops a finished video, unfortunately.
Not yet. Maybe AI, right? Maybe AI can help us with that.
Coming soon. So, I mean, thanks so much for sharing all this knowledge, Cairo. And any final thoughts for the audience looking into either side hustles or making a profit in an entrepreneurial way?
Well, I made a video about couch flipping actually, because I did that a few times in London. It's a little trickier here because there's lots of apartment blocks. I don't have a car. Renting trucks and stuff is still really expensive in this city. But in the US, it seems far more. It seems like the economics of it in the US make a lot more sense, especially with like garage sales, like you're like the wizard of, and stuff like that. So maybe start off with something like that. Start off with something small. I mean, with Airbnbs, it's not free to start. You do need to get at least 1 month's deposit, usually probably a 6-week deposit, first month's rent in advance. So it is quite a few $1,000s to get started with it. So any YouTube video that's saying to you, oh, get started on Airbnb for free, it's not really true. You need to have those deposits, or you have to convince the landlord to do a profit share. But that's less, I don't know. In my experience, landlords are less excited about that because they're like, okay, so if you do a bad job, I get less money than if I just rent the flat out on the regular market. That doesn't sound great to me. Unless the landlord is like, okay, but if you do well, I'll make, far more money. A lot of landlords are more risk averse. They want to get their kind of average yield, right? So maybe starting like couch flipping, try it out for a week, or try garage sale flipping like you're the pro of, right? Just see if that kind of hustle interests you, and then you can always take that money, put it to one side, to start a slightly more intensive side hustle like Airbnb stuff. The counterpoint to that is that if you are living in let's say you're living in a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, it also depends on your age and where you are in life as well. If you're married with kids, maybe you don't want random Airbnb people coming into your house, right? But it could work well instead of having regular housemates. Maybe you've just started to enter the job market, and you can try and get those housemates. Instead of having housemates who are paying a third of your rent, let's say you've got 3 rooms, you can be doing that on Airbnb. You'll probably have more of the flat to yourself, and you will most likely, depending on where you are, cover more of the rent that you would have gotten from those housemates. So that's like the easier way to get started with Airbnb rather than trying to find landlords and start all from scratch. It might be easier to get your already existing landlord to agree to something like this because you have that built up relationship already.
Awesome. Well, Cairo, I just want to acknowledge you for being a gritty entrepreneur, and I wish you the best of success. Again, we can find you at Life of Cairo, and thanks for coming out and talking.
Man, thanks so much. I can't wait for our interview where I grill you about the garage sale.
Coming up soon. Let's do it.
Thank you so much, Dan.